Okay, so when we left off with our last lesson, we had placed our 3 clips on video track 1, and we had put the transitions between the tracks before the Mr. Wu clip, and again at the end to separate it from the titles and the closing credits. And then we had placed our Pizza Maker video clip on track 2 to create a video overlay, and then we had separated the 3 sections of movement, the 3 segments. The first segment being a repositioning animation to bring it in from off screen, the second one to be holding in place, and the third one to move it off by repositioning it to the bottom half of the screen. And we made sure to match it up with Mr. Wu's movements on track 1, and we also had to resize it to get it to the half size so it would be only taking up that much of the screen. Now, in lesson 1, we use just the one type of animation, which we call repositioning, which is basically changing the position of a clip in its XY coordinates from one position at the start to another position at the end of the clip. And the longer the clip is, the longer it'll take it to move from one position to another. So we use that to bring in the Pizza Maker clip and then to take it out again at the end of that sequence. A lot of what we actually worked on in that first lesson will come into play in the second lesson. However, we're going to increase the complexity a little bit. As we'll see right now, we're going to take a quick look at the segment that we're going to do now, which is the animation of the pizza segment, where Mr. Wu works his magic on a pizza. All right, so let's take a look at that clip again, and we'll see where the segments of the animation sequence occur, okay, so that we can break this down for ourselves and think ahead as we plan for the creation of this animation sequence. So segment 1 is the pizza coming from off-screen and up to position. Segment 2 is it holds its position. Segment 3 is it rescales to a smaller size. Segment 4 is it holds its position again. Segment 5 is it is pushed off the screen. All right, so in lesson 1, we learned about the one form of animation, which is called repositioning, which is simply changing the X and Y position of a clip from where it starts to a new XY position when it finishes, and that creates movement on the screen, which we use to bring the objects in and out of frame. For this segment, we're going to also incorporate the rescaling animation feature, which is actually to change its size from the beginning to the end of the clip. In addition to using that new animation feature, we're also going to be using a new menu, which is the color key. Color key is also known as chroma key. It's also known as green screening or blue screening. They all mean the same thing. And it's used to actually remove color and create transparency so that we can see through one layer to the layer beneath it. Now, before we begin the next steps of actually animating today, I want to remind you that there are Google Slides decks posted in your Google Classwork stream under the Animation Exercise Mini Project topic that contains step-by-step instructions for how to do both Lesson 1 and Lesson 2. So you can have those up in another window to look at while I go through this with you on video, or you can do just one or the other, but I just want you to understand that they are there and available for you to help you get this done in any way possible. Now, because this sequence is more complicated than the previous animation sequence of the Pizza Maker, in that we have to both use the changing of position as well as the rescaling of size. There's 5 segments instead of 3. We're going to use another tool that's available to us in WeVideo that will help us keep track of things by actually marking points on the timeline where things need to happen. So we're going to expand by sliding down here on the bottom right, by sliding our little blue slider over a bit so that we can get this thing stretched out, which basically zooms in on our timeline, and that allows us to get a more precise placement of our playhead. Then we're going to move our playhead to that point where Mr. Wu is going to begin bringing in that pizza, right? That is the first beginning, the very beginning of this entire sequence, and the beginning of the first segment of the sequence would be when that pizza first begins to appear. So as I slide this here, I reach a point right about there where the next thing that's going to come on the screen is going to be the pizza, right? So I've got that placed where I need it to be. I don't have to worry about the timer now like I did before because I'm going to use this other tool. And the tool is right here. It's on the playhead. You have the scissors that you've used before, but over here on the other side, you've never used this. This is called the Add Marker button. You click that, and you add a marker on the timeline, a little yellow marker that tells you where you want something to happen. So we're going to put in, we're going to name it. We can actually give it a name. We're going to call it number 1. This is our marker number 1. And we can leave a little title, which can be a note to us, and we'll just have it tell us that this is where the first segment should begin. Okay, once we've done that, we can hit done. And now we need to find that place where the first segment ends and the second segment begins. So the animation would be that it's going to change position. It's going to come from off screen there at the bottom, and it's going to come all the way up and move up into position. And that'll be right about when Mr. Wu's hand gets to this position here. He kind of stops moving and his hand stays still. That's it right there. Okay, so we're going to drop a second marker here by clicking that Add Marker tool on the left. It's kind of like the little pins you leave on an internet map. We're going to title it again. Click number 2, typing number 2, and this is where our second clip, or sorry, segment, we're calling it second segment. I'm abbreviating it to seg, should begin. Okay, and again, we're done. We can move on. So now the second segment is just the pizza staying in one position. It's not it's not moving at all. It's just going to sit there. So the next time a segment has to happen where there's going to be an actual change, an animation, this is actually going to be the rescaling. So Mr. Wu leaves it there, right? And it just sits there, but then he reaches around it. So follow his arms, and he puts his hands top and bottom on that pizza. And I'm going to have to move myself over a little bit more. And so basically he gets his hands around it and then he begins to squeeze it. So we wouldn't start squeezing it until his hands are about the size of the pizza. So really right about there, when his bottom hand has just come into frame, that's about how big the pizza is going to be. So we're going to stop right there. That's going to be where we drop marker number 3. So click the Add Marker, title it number 3, and this is where the third segment begins. And save, and done. Okay. Now, the third segment contains animation, which is the rescaling, and that is going to start at this size, and it's going to end, this segment will end when the pizza is as small as it's going to get, which is basically when Mr. Wu's hands stop moving. So kind of slide your playhead until you reach that point where Mr. Wu's hands basically have stopped moving, which is right about there for me. And again, hit the Add Marker to drop the marker. And this is going to be number 4, because this is where the third segment ends and the fourth segment begins. So go ahead and give it a little title to remind yourself. Done. Now again, the 4 segment, nothing happens. It just sits there at that size. So we're just going to drag it along, and nothing changes again until Mr. Wu pushes it off the screen. So we're going to slide our playhead along until we reach that point where Mr. Wu has started to push that pizza off the screen. And basically his hands get to right about there. That's pretty good. Pretty much even with the edge of this plant behind him, that's about where I would say is a good place to have it start. And we're going to drop a marker by clicking the Add Marker button, and we're going to call this number 5. This is where the 5th segment begins. We'll type that in as a title. All right, and then of course, the last marker we're going to drop is actually when the 5th segment ends, which is the end of the whole sequence, and that is when the pizza is all the way off the screen. So we'll just slowly slide our fader over until Mr. Wu's hand has basically pushed it all the way off the screen like that. It's going to be a very short segment, and so then again, because it happens fast, we will click Add Marker to drop the last marker, which will number as number 6, and we can just put that, call that end of sequence. All right, it's the end of the 5th segment, and it's the end of the entire sequence. Okay, and done. Okay, so now if we kind of pull back a bit so we can see all our markers, we can see that we have placed the markers on the timeline where everything needs to be happening, right? I'm a little too far out, but I'll go in a little bit. So now this is the first marker is where Mr. Wu begins to pull it up, and then we can see that each of these indicates a moment where we need to split our clip into its different segments. Okay, now that we have marked where it's going to go, the next thing for us to do is bring in that graphic, the image that's going to be an image overlay or graphic overlay of the pizza. We're going to place it on the timeline, and then we're going to adjust it to get it ready to work with. So first, make sure that you do have your shared folder open, right? You went to My Media, and you click Shared, and you went to Forming Arts, so you have it handy. And then you're going to grab that pizza with a bright green background. You're going to drop it down here onto Video 2 and just bring it so that it starts right there where you dropped your marker number 1. Okay, and then you're going to grab it and stretch it so that it goes past the ending, right past the end there at marker number 6. So you know that you have stretched out this image to last as long as it needs to last. The nice thing about images is you can make them last for as little or as much as you want, as long or short amount of time as you want on the timeline by simply stretching them or making them larger or smaller, and that makes them last for a longer or shorter time in your timeline. Okay, so now we've placed it. Now before we can start doing any work with it, we have an issue with it. We need to, first of all, it's too big, and we have to get rid of that green. So this is the color keying that I was talking about. So let's start by color keying that. So let's go here and double click on the pizza image to select it. And then use this menu all the way over here, the color key menu we talked about. And to get rid of any color that you don't want, that you basically are going to turn it invisible so you can see what's underneath it, you simply click on the select color tool, which is like a little eyedropper. And if you've selected it, when you drag your cursor over onto the preview window, you will see it turns into that little eyedropper icon. Then just click the color you want to get rid of, and kabang, it's gone. It's that easy. Okay, now, a lot of times you'll notice kind of a hard edge around the image. You can soften that up. You can get rid of a bit of that by pulling on these two defringing sliders. Pull them in a little bit on either end, and that will help get rid of some of it. Don't go too far, though, because that can begin to open up holes in your image as it tries to overcorrect. So just pull it in a bit on either end, and that will help soften that edge. Okay, now The other problem we have is that it's too big. So we're going to make it smaller by going over here and going to a menu we've been to before, the transform menu. And we want it to be at 73% of its size, about 3/4. So we can either use the slider and slide it down, or even easier is just to go right here and type 73. And boom, now it's the size we need it to be. Now, we're going to position it in a little bit, but we need to be able to see Mr. Wu's hands to do it right. So for now, let's just kind of move it up here into the corner, kind of out of the way. And we're going to actually place it where it belongs in just a moment. But now that we've got this here, it's the right size, and we've color keyed, chroma keyed, green screened out the stuff we don't need, we can save changes. Okay, so similar to what we did before with the pizza maker video, where we actually placed the object that we needed, which was the video. We put that up here in the corner, and we set it where it was going to live, basically its home base, which was the position it was going to move into and move out of. We're going to do the same thing with the pizza. We're going to position it to where it's going to come in and live, basically. Okay, and so what we'll do with that is we'll actually take our slider, our playhead, and we're going to move it to that point where Mr. Wu is about to squeeze the pizza, because that's where it's going to be when it begins to shrink. So that's the position it's going to move into. So I've got his hands here again. Remember, we brought his hand just barely up into the frame. So now I can double click on the pizza, and I can pull it down here, and I can kind of fit it in that place, in that spot. Okay, it's pretty close to where it needs to be. It may not be just exactly right. You may want to fiddle with it on your own, but that's about where we want it to be. So Mr. Wu can actually be able to begin to squeeze it. Okay, and it's going to be its home base. That's where it's going to come in and sit, and then from there, all the other changes will happen. So for me, that's 935 X and Y 284. You can place yours there if you like, or if you see a position you like better, you can put it there. Okay, then we save the changes. All right, so now this thing is where it needs to be. It's positioned, and that's going to be its home base. Okay, now one more thing that we can do is move on to actually separating or splitting the graphic overlay of the pizza into its separate segments. Okay, moving right along, we're now ready to split our entire clip here of the pizza graphic. We're going to actually split it up into its 5 segments, and to do that, we are going to again want to zoom in a bit so that we can work more precisely. And then it's very simple. We take our playhead and we just slide it along the clip until we come to each one of our markers that we've already placed, and we simply use the scissors to split the clip into its segments. So at each one of these, you're just going to use the scissors to split. And you can slide along and then just click on the timeline, and it will actually pop your playhead right there. You don't have to slide your playhead along the whole way. That takes a long time. So you can just use your slider down here and then click to bring the playhead to where you need it to be. Remember, you can use your left and right arrows to move your playhead forward or back by a frame to get it right where you want it to be. I think I'm going to go with that there. Imperfect, but it'll work. And I'm going to click the scissors to split it. Okay. Then we're going to keep going. We're going to come to the next one. Bring our playhead over the marker and click split. And that our next segment is made. And we keep going. Here's the end of our 4th segment. It happens right here. So we're going to click that to split it with the scissors. And now we have our fifth segment, which ends right here with the end of the entire sequence. Split it one more time, and then click and delete this last bit that you don't need. Okay, you've now effectively, if you pull back and look, you can see that you have now split that segment that clip that you made into 5 separate segments that we can begin to animate. Okay, one of them is so small you barely see it. Go like that. Now you can see it better. Okay, there's all 5 of the segments ready for the next stages. Okay, so now it's time to actually animate the segments that require either repositioning or rescaling. And in this case, we know that they are the first, third, and fifth. These two here do not actually require any animation because they are simply the pizza holding its position after it's moved or been changed in size. So we're going to go to this first one. We're going to double click on this segment here, and we can go to the beginning and the end, and we can see where it's going to start, where it's going to end. Now, we already know where it's going to end. It's going to end right here. Mr. Wu will have pulled it up, so that is our ending position. So we really only have to worry about where it needs to start. Okay, so let's get ourselves into the animation menu, which is right here, the third one. And again, we know where it's going to end. We just have to set it to where it's going to start. Okay, so we should select start. And before we move anything, we want to make sure it stays on the same X value, so the same horizontal value. We don't want it moving to the left or to the right. So we're going to make sure we keep this number the same from the beginning to the end. So for me, the number is 935. If you're using the same numbers as me, that's great. But whatever number you have in X, be sure that that number stays the same from the beginning to the end. What's going to change is the Y value, the position on the vertical axis. So we simply grab, we see the arrows, that means we can move this layer. We grab the pizza and we just drag it down off the screen. Drag it down till it's just off the screen, and then make sure that we have the same value here. And I had to double check. Okay, that was 935. So I'm going to type in 935 again. If you're not using the same numbers as me, just be sure that the number is the same in the X for both the start and the end. And it starts there and it ends here. All right, now let's use our play button and see how it works. There it is. Mr. Wu's hand kind of moves around the edge. That's okay. As long as it's doing what we need it to do, that's the goal that we're setting for ourselves. Okay, cool. So it's moving up, and then that is a keeper. So we just click Save Changes, and then we can test to see how it flows into the next clip. He brings it up, and pop, it's in position. That's awesome. Now it just stays there during the second clip, but now here in the third clip, we're going to start to shrink it. So that's called rescaling. So we're going to double click here to open up bring up the third segment for editing, and it's going to actually start at this size. Okay, so it's here when it starts, but it needs to be a smaller size when it's done, right? So here's the start. So let's get to the end, and now we're going to use our scale, and we're going to get it down to 35. Now we can do that by moving the slider or simply typing in 0.35 in the little box there. And now it's the right size. But we're also going to have to change its position because it's not really quite between Mr. Wu's hands. So we'll also grab it and put it right here. So it's right there between Mr. Wu's hands, okay? And I'm going to give myself an easy number to remember here. I'm just going to make it 555. So I have these values of 1140 and 555 are the final X and Y position, and it's at 35% of its size, okay, when it gets to its shrunken size. Now that's important because that is where it is going to have to start in the next clip, okay? And we're going to have to make those changes for the next clip because, you know, it's still in the next clip, it's still big. All right, so we've got that there. We're going to remember these numbers. For me, 1140, 555, and it's at 35%. We're going to save this, Okay, and now we can play it from the beginning and just kind of watch it. Always good to see it, how it's progressing. So it comes up, that's great, holds its position perfectly. Then Mr. Wu comes in and he squeezes it down and it gets smaller. Okay, and now you see it pop to a bigger size. Okay, so that's why we have to get it to where it needs to be here on the fourth clip. It doesn't move, but it's actually in a different position and a different size. We have to get it there. So at the start, the first thing we should change, always change the size first, the scale. So it should be at 35. The reason you do that is because its size affects its X and Y coordinates very much. And then we can just type in the numbers that we know we need. 1140, 555, okay, 555, bam. All right, now it's exactly in the same place and same size, same scale as it was when it ended in the other clip. Okay, and now it's going to end in the same spot, right, before Mr. Wu pushes it off. So go to end, and we're going to set it at 0.35. And we're going to set these numbers again to be 1140 and 555. And now it will stay in that same position from the beginning of this segment till Mr. Wu's about ready to push it off. Okay, I don't know why it's giving us that little moment there. That was just a little glitch. Okay, so we can see here it is, and here he's about to push it off the screen. So life is good. All right, we can save the changes on that clip, and now we can actually watch it as it flows up into, comes up in the frame, repositioned. It holds its position there, no changes from beginning to end. Okay, then we rescale and reposition, and now it stays at that position and doesn't move. And now we're going to get ready, and we're going to force it off the screen here in the next moment. And that's going to require, once again, as we open up the fifth clip, we're going to have to change its size from the beginning. It's going to be at the same size and the same position before he shoves it off the screen. So we'll make sure that we have done that. Okay. And for now, let's make sure that it's got its, the end, it's going to be again at 35. And we want it to stay at the same vertical position. We don't want it to move up or down. So the Y will be the same as where it starts at 555. We may have to fix that when we're done. But then we're going to change its X position by moving it off the screen. So we're going to grab it and slide it until it's just off the screen like that. And that's our new number. Let's just make sure that our Y value is the same. Okay, test it to be sure it looks right from there to there. Good. That's what it's supposed to do. Save changes. Okay, and now let's see how it looks when it gets pushed off. So here it is in the small size, and Mr. Wu shoves it off the screen. Looks good. All right, it's going to be just fine. So we're very happy with that. So we have now effectively finished this sequence where we repositioned it, it held in place, and then we rescaled it, made it smaller, as well as moving its position. So two animation commands at once. And then we had it hold in its new size and new position. And then one more time we repositioned by starting it at one XY position and moving it off the screen at the end for the second XY position. So this segment is now complete. This animation sequence is now complete. All right, so now we have taken care of all the visual elements for this exercise. We began, as you recall, by placing the three main clips on video one. We had our titles to open with. We had our Mr. Wu clip with all of his actions. And then we have our closing credits. And then we laid the video overlay of the pizza maker. We dropped him down here and we split him into three segments and we animated each of those pieces. And then we dropped markers here to mark the places where we were going to have the more complicated pizza animation sequence happen. And then we dropped that clip in, color keyed it, changed its size, and went through all the animation and resizing and scaling that had to happen to complete that sequence. So with all that done, the only thing left to do is place the audio track. And that's right here. So grab the audio track, drop it down here, and have it snap right there to the beginning of your video. That's where it's going to start. The nice thing about this audio clip is that it already has a built-in fade in, so you don't have to fade in. We just need to make sure that it ends when the video ends, and we want to add a little fade out on it. So we could bring our playhead over here and we could, clip it, but it's just as easy with audio to just grab it and drag it until it stops. It basically snaps to the end of our video. So that means the music ends there. And then we want it to fade out. So we'll just go a couple seconds back into the music clip there. Drop, remember the blue line represents the audio level. We're going to clip that, put a dot there to indicate where we'd like it to begin decreasing in volume, and then we'll pull the point down here to 0. So it's going to go from that 100% mark to the 0 mark. And so let's see how that works. Okay, it's fine, but the music's really loud. This is a very loud clip, which is great. It gives us a lot of room to work with. So let's just decrease the overall volume so that when it gets to 100, it's not that loud. So go over here to the audio menu, and you see your slider. That's your master volume for the entire thing. So this determines how loud it can get at its loudest point. And we're going to drag it down to 30%. Okay, or very close to 30. That's good. And that volume is a nice, it's perky. The volume's there, but it doesn't drown out. It just doesn't blow your eardrums out when you're trying to listen to it. There's no audio to worry about, no voiceover we have to worry about balancing with, but we also don't want the music to just, hurt people's head. Okay, once we have done that, we have completed all the steps of the actual exercise, and you can call this sucker done. Okay, so we've finished everything up. All the visuals are in place, all the audio's in place, so now it's time. We're satisfied with it. We're going to submit this video. So first we're going to finish it. So we click Finish. We're going to change the name here, and you should change it to capital PA and then whatever your period number is. So, for example, if your period number 4, then put in PA4, okay, then underscore. And now this keyword here is Animex. So ANIM for animation and EX for exercise. All one word and all lowercase, Animex. Then underscore, and then put your first initial and your last name. Okay, just like that. Then you can select whichever of the, if you usually end up with a few different choices for thumbnails. Doesn't really matter. But you can choose whichever one you like. And then be sure, this is one thing people often forget to do, be sure to click HD, the high definition, so that it actually will process it at the highest resolution, so it'll be the clearest and sharpest it can be. Okay, remember, it doesn't matter what computer you do this on, because the processing happens in the cloud on the processors that belong to WeVideo. So your machine doesn't have to deal with this at all, so you don't have to worry if your computer is kind of slow. It's not doing it on your computer. Okay, once you've done that, you've got the name changed to PA, your period number, underscore, Animex is the key term, ANIMEX, all lowercase, one word, underscore, first initial last name. You've selected HD, and you've chosen whichever it is that you like for your thumbnail. You do not have these buttons, so don't even worry about them. They only show up in the teacher's mode. But you're now ready to export. So you click Export. And it'll queue up into the queue as it waits for its chance to be pulled into the processor and processed by the WeVideo servers. And it can take, some time or no time at all, but there it is. Once it's in there, it should not take very long to actually process. It just depends on how much of a load there already is on the servers waiting in front of you. But since it was only it's only a short video of a couple of minutes, then we should see, actually it's a minute, just less than a minute or just over a minute. So we should see it process pretty quickly. Okay, and once it is actually completed processing, as you know, it will pop up and it will show you this link and give you the chance to share it. So if you click that link, it'll take you into WeVideo, into the share screen, where you can actually watch it, one more time, make sure you're happy with it. And then once you are, then you just click Google Classroom and go through the steps that you already know about how to actually submit this to your classroom for performing arts, and just find the assignment that says submit your animation exercise video here. Remember that if you try to turn it in late, so if you try to turn it in after midnight tomorrow, Friday the 19th, you won't see the actual assignment there anymore because it will close. You cannot submit from this program, WeVideo, you cannot submit late work into Google Classwork. It just won't let you do that. So what you have to do then, if it's too late to submit it that way, is you'll actually need to download it to your computer, and then you can upload it that way. You can attach it to the assignment by going into Google Classwork, opening up the assignment, and then when it asks you what you want to add, you just go and find the video on your desktop and add it that way. Okay. So if it's before the deadline, you can add it right here from WeVideo. If it's after the deadline, you'll have to go into Google Classroom and add it from your desktop where you'll have downloaded it. Okay. So hopefully that is clear to you. All right. So again, I hope you can think about all the wonderful ways you can use this animation and transitions to really perk up your projects from this point forward. And have a great day.